Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews, a podcast where we watch films from our youth and ponder the question, was that any good? This is one of those weird times when we're watching a more recent film because we're sort of completionists. I would say this film firmly sits outside of our normal timeline because what's this, 2013? Something like that? 2014? I need to look it up.
Yeah.
Oh no, 2011
before.
actually, which puts it behind at least All About Steve? When was that one? 2012?
I think it's Crazy Stupid Love the latest.
Crazy Stupid Love is the latest. All About Steve is 2009. Crazy Stupid Love 2011. Same year.
Well,
Same year. But I mean,
what is
it's obviously but it's obviously not the the oldest we've done because obviously the earliest one we've ever covered technically in a bonus episode, Secrets of Dumbledore 2022. But if we're not including the bonus episodes, I think 2011 might be the oldest we've done.
Yeah, I count. Well, I for me, it's not so much bonus or not because I count. As much as it destroyed us, I do count. The Harry Potter season as a proper season. I think it's more. To be fair, in some ways, I think it's Crazy Stupid Love because that is a film chosen, not as opposed to a film that we needed to do because we were doing a franchise. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, for example, if we did Indiana Jones, if we hadn't done Indiana Jones last year and we did it next year, we would include Dial of Destiny because it was part of that franchise.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah, that's right. So if we're not doing franchise ones, then I think they can. But yeah, anyway, point being, we're in 2011. It was a simpler time, Chris.
Well, I mean, it was literally a simpler time in terms of this movie. It is, if nothing else, this movie is clearer. But before we do that, Dan, you went to I've never seen this movie. You went to see it at the cinema. I understand.
Yes, yeah, I believe so. It's hard to remember exactly how this played out because if I'm being honest with you, this film kind of, understandably so, having just recently rewatched it, washed over me in a very uneventful fashion. But yeah, I remember disappointment at World's End, and I don't really have too many specific members of On Stranger Tides other than not liking it, which is that is how simple it was, and I mean like a real disappointment of just like, oh god, this is, I think I'm done with these because I then did not see Dead Men Tell No Tales. I've never seen Dead Men Tell No Tales. Or Salazar's Revenge, as it was known internationally. I don't have a huge amount to say in terms of my memories of watching this, other than that I watched it, I didn't like it, and I took in so little of it it was so uninteresting to me in the moment that I didn't commit much of it to memory, to the point where watching it this time, in some elements, felt like rewatching it. Because all I genuinely remembered, it seems, Chris, is the first act. I couldn't recall anything after Jack meets and sword fights Penelope Cruz's character. So I remembered the escape and him meeting the king, and then being on top of those like horse-drawn carriages, that sort of little chase sequence. And I remembered that there was a fake Jack Sparrow that was getting a crew, and when he met them, it was Penelope Cruz in disguise. I remembered all of that. That had gone in and stayed. Everything else must have just washed over me because it got to that point in the movie, and I genuinely was like, I don't know what happens next. I have literally no memory now of what goes on, and like a couple of moments came vaguely back to me as I was watching. But no, and that really does go to some way to saying how I originally reacted to this film, which is that it clearly did not engage me very well because, by the end of the first act, as we're heading into the adventure itself, I was tuned out, I think, to some degree. And this is your first time watching it, so I'm curious then, what was your experience? Because that was my experience first time watching it. Your first time watching it was presumably within the last 24 hours. How did you find the film on your first watch?
My first time watching it, Dan, I started watching this movie at 11:30 last night. Like, I am tired. Look, there are some elements of it that I did enjoy. I think there's some great visuals. I think there's a sequence which arguably nails Captain Jack in a way better than I've seen any other movie do. Mm-hmm. Which we'll talk about. But also, a lot of it was boring. Like, a lot of it was really quite dull. So I was bored for a lot of it, and I think the problem is to kind of give you, because this is my reaction. Mm-hmm. And I guess we're beginning to get into reviews, and also fundamentally, it's always weird with a kind of, for when we do a franchise, because recommend or not recommend becomes very, if you watch the others, you might as well, because you could, if you watch this in the right scenario, it's an all right summer movie to put on. It's an all right, blockbuster. Mm-hmm. Like, it's fine. So there's that for one. But two, it's the lack of care in as in the characters. I don't care about anyone in this movie. Like, I don't, and it makes you not care about what's happening, because the movie in part doesn't really care. The movie has a piece of MacGuffin that, by their own admission, none of the characters really even want. Like, they've all got these really the British want it because the Spanish want it. The Spanish want it because they want proper full-blown spoilers, by the way, from here on out. The Spanish want it because they want to destroy it. Jack did want it at the end of the last movie, but is now sort of along for the ride and just keeps saying, "I don't particularly want it."
Yep. Which they explain in a brilliant way, though. We'll come back to that. But I think there's something very genius about what they've done with Jack in this. But yeah, carry on. Sorry.
Barbossa doesn't want it at all. He's there, and I can't. I'm looking forward to discussing Barbossa, because I want you. I don't know if it's because I was watching it late at night, but I haven't, in my thinking about it as I went to bed and thinking about it this morning, I haven't worked out why Barbossa doesn't feel quite right, and I would really like you to tell me. And so, but he doesn't want it. He doesn't want it at all. He just wants to get Blackbeard, and Blackbeard doesn't. Well, Blackbeard's after it, but it's more his daughter's after it for him. The ending to it, just in case there is anyone hanging on, the ending twist. Well, it's not a twist; you can see it coming. But I liked that. I thought that was good. The love story is so paper thin. It's unbelievable. Like,
yes, 100%.
It's crazy.
You snip the love story. Get rid of that.
It just doesn't need to be there. So there's just a lot of even the mermaids, which are wicked, is like, it's fucking convoluted in a way. It's like, who discovered this? Who was like, were they just randomly like, oh, let's, you know what we should do? Let's pop a mermaid's tear in that cup. Like, oh, okay, fine. That's not working. Well, you know what? Maybe the mermaid's tear isn't fresh enough. Like, it's just MacGuffin for the sake of MacGuffin. Like,
is that not?
Why does that exist?
Yeah, but is that not like a? Legend tells that's what you have to do to make it work. It's not I don't think anyone was. I don't think somebody found the Fountain of Youth and was like, right, I've got a list of objects we can try to put in this to make it work. We're going to start all the way with just seawater, and we're going to work our way down through all the liquids. It's a big list, so get on it, guys. We're going to get everything in here. We're going to we'll try with a bit of coffee dipped in. Boss, yeah, the last thing on this list is mermaid's tear. Yeah, we're not going to find that, so I'll put it right at the bottom of the list. We'll try that last. I suspect that's not quite how it went. I've got to imagine there's like, at some point someone found a scroll with instructions, some ancient information, and then that's just been passed down verbally, so people who know about it know that's how it works.
But the problem is, you know what? I'm all right with mermaid's tear because, like you say, fine, ancient mythical stuff. The problem is, oh no, it needs to be fresh mermaids tier. Well, why? So we can keep the mermaid around for the plot. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, why is it mermaids? So we can do mermaids. What on our pirate bucket list have we not done? We've not done Blackbeard and we've not done mermaids. All right, whack them in. Like, we've not done ship in a boat, a ship in a bottle. Don't do that. It's weird. Tiny monkey. It's bizarre. Like, you know, and I just think but it is, like I say, there's a particular sequence that I really enjoyed. It is harmless fun for a lot of it, and whilst it is convoluted, it is not difficult to follow. Especially, you know, bearing in mind I was watching it at fucking 1 a.m. It was not difficult to follow, and it did feel like they were trying to take on board some of the lessons of the criticisms of the second two movies. And I could see why someone would go, you know what, I don't really like all the mythology crap, and I don't like having to, you know, especially, we talked about it when we reviewed them, Dead Man's Chase and At World's End, you need to pay attention to like every line of dialogue, because every line of dialogue is expositional. So I can see someone, whilst I personally didn't, for some of the reasons we talked about, I can see why. If someone were to say to me, this is my second favourite Pirates movie after the first one, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, you know, if you've got no particular love for Will or Elizabeth and you don't like the heavy, heavy lore of 2 and 3, or the tone of 3, like coming off the back of 3, this is a much lighter tone. I don't think it's got the visual spectacle, especially for what was at the time, as far as I understand, the most expensive movie ever made. I think it's especially not got the visual spectacle.
And no, also, this one was cheaper than the previous one.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it's also, and this is a real kind of specific nitpick, and sorry, I've ranted about a bunch of things, Dan, apologies. This is that fucking period of time, isn't it, Dan? This is from that period of time where you watch a movie now and you go, oh, and I'll be honest, well, I've not checked this, Dan. I might be wrong in what I'm about to say. I might be wrong. I've not checked. You can tell me if I'm wrong, no doubt. But I'm assuming, Dan, that this movie was released in 3D. Because it's from that time where there's just swords sticking out of doors at the screen. Like, with that sense of, oh, this is from that 3D phase where things were, like, deliberately poking out or whatever, and like coming at the audience and coming at the camera, basically.
Would you?
Am I wrong?
Would you like the answer? Would you like the answer to that question, Chris?
Yeah, I'd love the answer.
Let me cue this up. 1 second. One very quick second. You ready? Because we're gonna do it. We're gonna do the answer. I don't know how long this drum roll goes on for, Chris. I should have checked that before I rolled it. This film was indeed released in 3D.
There you go.
It didn't go. It didn't finish. It just went on. I glanced at the file I'd started, Chris, and saw it was 52 seconds long, and I was already 12 seconds in and bored.
Oh, we don't need that.
So I didn't wait until the end.
Yeah,
Does that end on a? Does that end on a though? Wait a second. Oh no! It just sort of peters out. Fine. You know what's funny? You know, on YouTube they show you where the most listened to or watched parts of a video are now. You can see where people have clicked to. This video is amazing. It's a drum roll. It's 52 seconds long. It's too long. You can watch at the sort of 5-6 second mark. It start tapering off and then picking right back up at the end. Or people want to see if it ends on a. It's great. Anyway, yes, this film was released.
Just in case anyone's screaming it, I've just checked. According to Wikipedia, at least, this movie was more expensive than At World's End, and was at the time the most expensive movie ever made.
Incorrect.
Okay, well, Wikipedia's wrong then, but that's what I was going from.
So World's End was made for $300 million. A big part of the deal for making this movie was $250.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, what's Wikipedia say?
Wikipedia says its budget was a 378 net and 410 gross budget, and it's the 37 net puts it above At World's End, which was, I'm off it now, but 32 or something.
What? None of those numbers make sense at all. That's no. That's,
I don't know. It just says following inflated production costs, which ballooned the net budget to $379 million. The film was the most expensive ever made at the time of release. That's what it says.
No. On Box Office Mojo, that's no, that's not the case. Strange. I think the problem with Wikipedia is like if there's an article where someone tries to like guesstimate how much a movie costs, and they'll budget 400 million. Yeah, no, that's not accurate. I mean, one of the deals with this movie was very specifically, and this will be covered in the Triv, that they made it for less than the previous one. So they did,
right.
And I would definitely trust Box Office Mojo's verified sources over Wikipedia. So yeah, it's So I mean, I don't know. Do I get into how I'm feeling about it now on a rewatch? Is that where we go next?
Yeah. I've ranted. You go ahead.
Yeah. I do think there's a good case to be made for this film being better than World's End. I was pleasantly surprised on a rewatch. I think there's a lot of really good ideas here. I think the big problem is they're not communicated in the way that they should be because we don't have Gore Verbinski. I think his energy and imagination and the way he cuts action, the way he engages you in a scene with the filmmaking is really the biggest difference between this and the previous movie. These are the same two writers as the previous three movies. And when you look at it on paper, all the stuff that works about those is technically here. The sharp dialogue, all the interesting sort of ideas, the character work for Jack, which I think is absolutely maintained its consistency here to a scary degree. Because at the beginning of this movie, Jack is not looking for the Fountain of Youth anymore, right? He's just getting dragged into this story, as Chris pointed out. And I was thinking in the opening of the movie, why? Why is that? Why is that? Why wouldn't he just be still chasing after the thing he was chasing after the previous movie? What the movie reveals to us later on is this incredible idea that Jack didn't realize until he was looking into it how it worked. Once he was trying to find it, or maybe even had already found it, because there's an implication later in the movie that he's been to the Fountain of Youth before, or that he'd at least tried to get, he'd gotten pretty close, because throughout the rest of the movie he seems to know exactly where they're going. There's this incredible realization that to use it, you have to take life from another person. And the one thing that's been consistent about Jack Sparrow since movie one is that's where he always draws a line. And I love that this movie actually demonstrates the true villain is Blackbeard, because he's the only one evil enough to actually be willing to take someone's life for his own eternal youth.
Yeah.
Because everyone else, as Chris pointed out, are in it for different reasons. Interesting reasons, I think. I love the reveal that the Spanish are just there to destroy it because it's blasphemy to them, because that's a really great sort of double bluff, because the whole way through the movie you assume they're looking for it to abuse. The English want it because they don't want to get outdone by the Spanish. They certainly, the idea of the Spanish leadership having the ability to live forever, while he's only going to get older and frailer, like that kind of arrogance of the British, like is a really fun idea for why they're involved. Barbossa's personal vendetta against Blackbeard is a really great way to pull Barbossa into it. That makes sense because he took the pearl off, and we know how much Barbossa loves the pearl. The idea that he was defeated, a man that arrogant and that cocky and that sure of himself, beaten by another pirate. Absolutely not. And his desire for revenge is a really smart way to do it. Penelope Cruz's character, it's a devotion to her father, which is misguided, sure, but everyone's reasons for being on this journey make perfect sense, and I kind of actually love that only Blackbeard is the one that actually wants the Fountain of Youth, because no one else in this movie is evil enough to gain eternal life or life at the cost of others. I love that so much. I think that's really good, and that's why the ending works so well. That, even though you do see it coming, the switched cups, obvious, a mile away. No one thought. I don't think there's anyone watched this movie and not realized. And for those who don't remember the movie, the way the movie ends, because the whole time the movie, Blackbeard's been mistreating his daughter. the thing with the guns earlier in the movie where she's like, "You did know which guns had bullets in them, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And he had no idea. Therefore, because he basically threatened Jack by threatening her because he figured out Jack cared for her. And she was like, that was like a ploy, right? You knew which guns had bullets in it, and it was pretty clear he didn't care. Jack observes his flippant behavior towards her and uses it against him at the end of the movie when he lets them use the Fountain of Youth cups but switches them round, knowing full well that Blackbeard will take the one that gives life for himself,
which is great. And the audience can predict it, but it's still great. Like, right. Knowing how he's, because it's such a classic Jack. I think the best use of Jack, and it ties into the other scene I really like of him, but the best use of Jack is when he is seemingly playing the fool, but it's actually very, very clever, and you know what he's doing, so you get the joy of seeing it play out. You get the joy that Jack is getting. I did really like that. I thought the very end was a bit like trapping her on the island was a bit weird.
Yeah, I didn't care. I didn't care for that either. But yeah.
I agree with you. I thought the cup stuff was fantastic.
Yeah, I think so. I think. I think for me, like, what this movie is missing, and the reason I don't find it as engaging, and the reason why I think a person could rightly describe it as being a bit boring, is I just think it's missing that filmmaking spark. It's really interesting because we said at the end of the last episode, what could these writers do with a bit of time? Because there's so many good ideas in World's End, but they clearly didn't have the time to smooth out the script. Work out some of those little kinks through redrafts. Therefore, the final movie is a bit of a mess. So then you're in a weird situation, then, aren't you? Of like, oh, interesting. Sorry, it's funny. I'm just sorry. I for some reason because I've got the Wikipedia up on a separate. On a separate tab with my IMDb, the Box Office Mojo, and then my notes. As I was just flicking through them aimlessly, because I tend to do that, to have information sort of scrolling by while I'm talking, I did spot there's a Wikipedia linked to a Forbes article about the budget. So that information, it looks like, comes from Forbes, but how verified is it? About the information. Oh, I can't read it because I have an ad blocker on, and I refuse to remove it for Forbes' sake. So
yeah, it's on others as well. Like, I think it was on, I can't remember, but it's definitely been reported in other places. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about it to be too forthright on it.
Yeah. It's just that I know Box Office Mojo are really careful about, like, they tend to not use reported like figures unless they can verify them. They're usually quite good on the budgets. But yeah, anyway, that's glancing at that. I shouldn't be scrolling because that's completely. This is what happens when you're an ADHD person. I think you're scrolling around, just like information is passing by, then something will take you away, and that'll be where you thought. What we were talking about? The previous movie, the writers. So I think the writers, work on the previous movie. I suggested it was maybe not their fault, and I think looking at this, I think that kind of backs that up as a thought, because I think the script for this is perfectly fine. I think this is a good script. I think you give this script to Gore Verbinski, and he goes, right, let's jazz up a couple of the action scenes. I'm going to find some interesting visuals to stick in here. I'm going to sort of, because it's clear he was very involved in the creative process in the previous movies, right? And, there are certain scenes and sequences you can imagine that because there was a lot of talk of the film having a fairly improvised feel to the previous one, where, as they were shooting, he was coming up with ideas for visuals and scenes and iconography to put into the movie, right? Whether they were in the script or not. So I think you get this script, which is clear and concise, and the character arcs all work. Whether you like them or not are different. We can have that debate, and obviously one of them is so thin it blows over in the wind, being the love story, which is just absolutely needless. We'll get to that. But in terms of the actual like pirates action, the actual thrust of this movie, I really like what they've done with all this. I think Fountain of Youth played this way to reinforce the character of Jack, you know, to have another take on Barbossa. And I can tell you why. I don't know why you necessarily felt Barbossa was wrong, but I think the big difference is this is a Barbossa with his tail between his legs, which is, you know, neutered, you know, working for the British subservient, which is like, just feels like Barbossa would never, ever do that. But as the movie goes on and you learn he lost his ship, he lost his crew, and this is all just for revenge, you start to realize. I think by the end of this movie, Barbossa feels like Barbossa again, and I think that, you know, when he's using the poisoned sword to get the edge on Blackbeard.
Yeah, and that's a good moment where it's sort of you know, where he points the sword and the ship races off and stuff. I did like that. Yeah.
I think his
interesting.
I think his arc is that. His arc is he's been defeated, he's neutered, he's you know, tail between his legs. His journey is coming. I'm going to get back to being, you know, the fearsome pirate Barbossa. And by the end of the movie, he's running Blackbeard's ship. You know, it's a good arc for him. I like it. But go on, what were you going to say? Sorry.
Yeah, I think I like that they didn't make him and Jack the villains and fighting with each other for the sake of it. And I think one of the most fun scenes in the movies are the scenes where they're together. Actually, I think they have a good dynamic. You know, and that scene where they're trying to find the cups, and the scene then when they're captured, and there's some real gravity-defying shit with Jack. And it's weird that no one's noticing him climb that tree. But, you know, the last two movies had that too. Like, I don't particularly begrudge that. Like, you know, it's that classic, you know, in the first Die Hard, Bruce Willis wasn't a superhero. He is by the fourth movie. Like, I begrudge that less than some might, and equally, though, I get it if that's a real issue for some people. Yeah. But I think, in terms of the Barbossa and Jack of it all, I think some of the most fun scenes of the movie are when they're together.
Agreed. Yeah. So I think if I'm doing sort of an overall thought before we get into the more like scene by scene or storyline by storyline nitty gritty, I think general thoughts for me, it's a shame basically the Gore Verbinski didn't come back, or some other director, because look, I don't want to sound like I'm throwing shade over at Disney's favourite whipping boy. And then go say something deeply offensive to the poor guy. Oh God, I've even forgotten his name. Rob something. Ugh. He's like basically the guy Disney get in when they don't want. Oh my God, there's no polite way to say this. He's the guy Disney get in when they want someone to say yes. That's basically. I think his name is Rob Marshall, and I have no problem in saying that he is a jobbing director, right? He comes in and he does his work, and he does fine work. It's passable work, but his job is to come in and get it made physically. And his films all have this same problem of having absolutely no voice whatsoever, right? And again, there's just no way to say this kindly. Sadly, it's all going to sound like absolute shade, but he is just not that, seemingly, in my opinion, creative. He just gets the movie made. And like, you hand him a script, he makes it in the blandest possible way, just straight down the middle. The shots are really not very dynamic, though. You know, everything just feels drawn out. He clearly didn't deviate from the script much, and I feel like that is something that's missing in the tone of this film. The previous films have that chaos feeling, that improvisational feeling, and I'm not necessarily even talking about like in the third one where it's the bad kind of chaos because the script doesn't quite track in places. Even the first two, the two that I reviewed favorably on here, have a vibe of like there's a good script at the core of this, but then Gore Verbinski sort of like had the creative freedom to do what he wanted, whereas it feels like Disney hired Rob Marshall to just be like, get that on screen please, and he got that script on screen exactly as it was in the most practical way he could, which is a shame, because I feel like this franchise deserves better.
But I will say, looking at his, just looked him up and seen his filmography, and I think you can, I don't think this outweighs everything you've just said, but I think you can feel the influence in moments of this film of a director that's got experience in musicals. Some of the fight sequences, especially the sword fighting, It is choreographed almost like a dance, and look, that might not be what you want from a Pirates movie. Like, and it's not really what I want from a Pirates movie. I want that sort of scrappy fighting, like to think of a random example, Dan. Maybe Will and Jack in the first movie when they're in the blacksmith's office, something like that. But I think you can. There is a bit of, when it comes to some of the choreography, I think there is a bit of a stamp of him on
but
there.
But the choreography is done by the stunt coordinator and those guys. The director is picking where the camera's going, and those fights are shot very simply, just straight on, usually side on, like a video game. Like it's just shot in such an unimaginative way.
I don't know. I look. I'm not disagreeing with you, but for me personally, the bigger problem is the script. There's an entire love story we just don't give a shit about.
Yeah. That I agree with. But But is there anything else, like, of the stuff we've talked about, of the main thrust of the movie? Where are the problems coming from the script, other than the love story, which I agree with? What else is the script getting wrong?
I don't think there's a hero figure. I think so I think it's hard to care about anything when everyone, apart from maybe Barbossa and Jack to some degree, but I don't think we're made to care about anything that's happening in the film.
Who would you say the hero figure was in the previous two movies?
Well, Will and Elizabeth.
Sorry, three.
Elizabeth in the. Elizabeth.
Sorry, I corrected myself to three. I said two. There's three previous movies. Sorry.
I think in the last film it was Elizabeth. I think, and don't get me, but again, but also like just because something was also an issue in the other movies doesn't mean it's not a valid issue in this movie. Like, I think you could make an argument that Elizabeth was the hero figure.
Yes, but I think when we reviewed the previous two movies, we both said very clearly, like, when we thought the issues were the scripts and when they weren't. And I think, like, the scripts for the second two movies, which were obviously rushed into production, the issues we found were all the sorts of issues that usually get ironed out in, like, redrafting. Whereas, this one, that didn't happen. And I'm just sort of curious because, like, I thought this one was basically, like, the ideal turnover of that storytelling. And I also think not caring about the characters and not caring about what's happening in front of you is an engagement problem. And I think the engagement issue here, personally, it comes down more to the directing, because, like, on paper, there isn't much wrong with this script other than that love story, really, in terms of just making it a simple, fun pirate romp. Like, all the jokes are still there, all of the interesting scenarios are still there. And there's nothing on the page here that wasn't in the previous ones, which we reviewed much more favorably, or at least the first two particularly.
I think for me, and like I say, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that. I'm just saying, for me personally, like, the script, I don't think it's as funny. For example, I don't think it's as funny as the other movies. I can't particularly tell you a kind of standout joke for me, and that could be, maybe that's just where I watched it late. I don't know. I'll hold my hands up to that. I didn't love particularly that.
I just wanted to ask about that point, because the one thing I will say is I agree with that point. I do agree with that point, but I think that if I was to guess, and again, you correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I have a feeling that a lot of the jokes that were in the previous movies were improvised. There was, if you remember going back to the Triv for, like, the first couple of movies, there were tons of, this line was improvised, this moment was improvised. Like, Orlando Bloom improvised his little Jack impression in the first one. A bunch of, like, the lines were. I think Gore Verbinski had a real thing of, like, letting them go on the set as well and letting them find stuff as they went. And I wonder if a lot of them, when I'm thinking back to that trivia, a lot of those were about little gags. So I'm wondering if the scripts for the previous movies were equally, just in the middle on jokes, and a lot of it was found, through the filmmaking process. But again, that would come back to the lack of Verbinski, that more so than the script. on that point particularly.
Yeah, for me, yeah, fine. For you, like I say, for me, my instinct would be it's the script, the ending, with leaving her on the island and stuff like that. For me, there's a bunch of stuff where I'm like, I don't know for sure, because, even that last point is to some degree speculation. I don't know for sure, how
based in a huge amount of trivia about improvisation on set for all three films, and specifically improvisation around jokes.
Yeah, but again, for whether the jokes were improvised or came from the script in the last few movies doesn't necessarily affect my opinion on the script of this movie. So yeah, that was just. But I certainly think it's less. In terms of the direction, it is absolutely less. I feel like I overuse this word a lot, but it's less auteured than the previous three movies.
I don't think I would never in a million years be able to spot a Rob Marshall movie. He has absolutely no voice or no style of his own. It's so vanilla. It might as well not exist. It's really bad.
Yeah, and like I was about to say, whether you like or dislike At World's End and the choices it made, it's got an incredibly clear direction. It's got an incredible, he went into that movie wanting to make a darker movie, and a lot of people don't like the intro with the hanging and all that sort of stuff, but he committed to his decisions and his vision for those three movies in a way that I don't think is present in this movie. So again, I'm not disagreeing, but I think there are a bunch of problems.
Well, let's get into them then. So what else? Because obviously I was responding to your comedy point while it was sort of fresh in my brain. But let's talk about some of the other stuff there that you didn't think worked with the script. Because obviously I've covered the stuff that I thought was good about it. We'll get the other side. Sorry.
the Jack and what's her name? What's Penelope Cruz's character's name?
That is a great question that I should absolutely have the answer to. She is Angelica.
A lot of the Jack and Angelica stuff doesn't work for me. We don't need the scene of. We talked about it before. I think Jack should, to some degree, be a supporting character. Scenes like I might have feelings. Like, who gives a shit? Like, I don't particularly care about Jack having feelings. I also think if you're going to go down a route of does Jack have feelings, abandoning her on the island, it's a nice callback to sort of the situation he was put in. Also, you've got someone who you've literally just made. She's just been given the power of the Fountain of Youth. And even without that power of the Fountain of Youth, I don't understand, given her introduction scene is a big kick-ass fight between the two of them, given that she has been shown to be many times a pirate that can handle herself, I don't even know why she's submitting to that. Like, why is she not fighting Jack? Why is she not trying to knock him out and steal the boat? It's so weird, her, attitude of, well, I guess, you want to abandon me on this island, so I guess I'm stuck on this island then. It doesn't make any sense, I think, for the character, nor for the... I think the Jack and her plot... The script is trying to have its cake and eat it throughout, and it doesn't actually know what the stance is and stuff. And there's a few areas there that would be rich to explore that aren't. And that last scene for me of it just makes no sense.
Yeah, 100%. I'm on with you on the last scene. The last scene is general. I think they're just trying to be it's fun and coy. And he's left her on an island, but you can't trust Jack because he'll always screw you over in the end. With the usual rules of his morality applying. If it's easier for him just to dump you on an island, blah blah blah. But the one thing I will say that give the script just a little credit on that one is they do clearly make it seem like he knows she's getting off that island. Like he makes it very clear. There's trade routes there all the time. She'll be fine. They kind of play it as a jokey, like, this is my way of getting away from you. Like, I've now got a head start. Is kind of how they play it.
But then, what that does to me is that's the script, that's the makers. It might be our power.
This doesn't change my point from earlier because I've always agreed with you that this scene doesn't work. So I just want to
but it's not a debate. I'm answering your question. What did I think was bad about the script? It's not a competition. I think that for me is the movie, and it might, as I was about to say, it might be our boy Rob. It might be our boy Robbie making this decision. It feels like the script, the creators of the movie, going, she might be popular, she might not be. We don't want to.
Yeah, maybe.
We don't want to definitely. We don't want to definitely end up with these two characters together, even though we could just undo that at the next. Pirates has got a history, guys, of undoing shit from the movie at the end of the movie before. No. Like, it feels like they want the option of using her again, but aren't quite sure. So let's just pop her on an island.
Yeah. Weird. But I would like to. I must say as well that I do disagree with the notion that the script doesn't. The script doesn't get you invested in them throughout the movie. I actually thought it was a really interesting choice to have Jack sort of in that weird position where he's refusing to admit that there's a person he actually has feelings for, because he sees that as him being weak. So he refers to it as stirrings, and he gets called out by Gibbs. Gibbs is like, "You mean feelings?" No, not quite as far as feelings. No, just stirrings, which I really liked. And I thought that was a really interesting way to play it with Jack. The idea that he's so self-obsessed, he couldn't even, not only would he not let himself be drawn in by a human being like that, because that's a weakness to Jack, but also this idea that like he won't even let he won't even let it be spoken out loud. And the idea that it's almost this, and admittedly, I don't think the script does enough to lay into this, because I will say here that like, there's definitely more depth that could have been explored. I think what they did worked well enough for me, but there's definitely a hole you could stick your head in and sort of explore a whole other area of this story, which is this notion that like maybe the reason Jack is always screwing over all the people that he cares about the most is because he's self-sabotaging to some degree, because he doesn't see himself as being worthy of love, affection, friends, so he always sort of tries to undo it ultimately, because there's this idea here that like he got close to her and then he dipped, he just bailed, which is the movie does tackle and very much makes that clear. The area that the script could have, if it had found the time, plumb into a bit further, which would have been good and would have been interesting, and I think is maybe what you were maybe yearning for when you were watching it, is this notion of like, well, what does that tell us about Jack in terms of are we confirming that theory then, that idea that he's self-sabotaging because he's scared to let anyone get close, which to be fair, is a reasonably cliched notion. There's a lot of movies and TV shows that have done that story of a character that doesn't let others get close. It's usually these kind of like anti-hero types that end up in that situation. House. I'm trying to think of other examples. Like, my brain is turned off right now. It's too early in the morning. For those who was wondering, we started recording this at like 7 a.m. It's way too early to be having this conversation. That's the truth of it. So that is so there's definitely more to explore, but I do think it did enough to invest me in their relationship, or at least in as much as what it told me about Jack. But I don't think the movie wants me to want them to be together. So
no,
the reason I'm not invested in that. The reason I'm not invested in that notion is because I don't think the movie wants me to be invested in that. I do think the movie wants me to be invested in what their relationship is to each other, because to Jack, she's a clean example of his problem of getting away from people and never giving them a chance to be let in. And for her, Jack represents the counterpoint to Blackbeard, and that's someone who cares enough about her to not want her to die. Which is and I think maybe another area in which maybe the script misses the mark is the idea that at the end of the movie, she never outright seemingly learns the lesson. I don't think the script also does enough. I don't think the script does enough with her character in general, in the sense of like, that sacrifice at the end, what is in her head the sacrifice to save her father. He was literally playing a game earlier in the movie, which could have ended with her getting shot in the face there and then. And you can make an argument of, but he's been controlling her all her life, and she, she's a victim and has become, acclimatized to this, and kind of can't
can't help but this dedication because of how he's manipulated her. But I don't think that's in the movie. Like, I think you've got to add a lot to that.
I think
the script in the movie isn't doing.
The moment after that exact game you were just referring to, where she questions whether he knew which guns had bullets and not, I think demonstrates that's it's present. You could debate whether that's enough, but it's not there. I would say
I'd forgotten that happened.
Yeah. So because there's that moment, because it's one of my favorite moments in the movie, because I think it really illuminates her like situation with him. You know, because what it shows there is her willingness to trust him in the obvious evidence to the contrary. Like, we know, Jack knows, Blackbeard knows, we all know he was absolutely willing to kill her in that moment, right? But she's so, you know, whether it's rose-tinted glasses, whatever it is, she's so desperate to believe that someone cares about her, which is why it hurt her so much when Jack abandoned her earlier on, you know, in their lives. You know, which is why she's so bitter towards Jack. But I think this idea that she's so desperate for that, she's willing to believe him when he basically goes, of course I knew which guns had the bullets. You know, in a tone very much suggesting he doesn't. And that's no shade on Ian McShane, who does a great job as Blackbeard here. Ian
McShane's great.
Yeah, he's great. And again, this might, you know, this is maybe we're just talking matters of, matters of degrees. Because while I'm willing to say quite happily, I do think the movie does just enough. The key word there is just. I do sort of, especially now we're analysing it in more detail, I can see how actually that is really only one small moment in the film that does put it there, and it was enough for me. But what I'm realising now is maybe what the problem here isn't that it doesn't do that stuff, but it's not reinforced enough, maybe, is the issue.
Yeah, I think that's inherent across the whole movie and the whole script. Like, for example, Jack is quite literally, we have someone who is arguably being presented as our hero, and they are quite literally dragged into the adventure. And then throughout the movie, you sort of have these lines of acknowledgement of that, but not. And obviously, it's all over. And regardless of whether you think it's the only problem or one of a few problems, the issue with the love story of mermaid and missionary, I can't remember their actual name, which is inherent to the problem, is a huge issue on the movie. It's so, as a fan of love, to have, and it's exactly what you're describing there. It's like, oh, well, we need to show these two people are in love. All right, well, we'll have them look at each other sweetly and say they're in love. We need to show that he's going to protect her. All right, in one scene, he'll carry her and he'll encourage them not to kill her. Like, it's not enough. Like, that, as you've acknowledged, that love story is fucking dreadful.
Yeah, but I'll be honest with you, I do slightly disagree with your characterization of it, because I actually think they do too many scenes of it that just don't do anything beyond he wants to protect her. It's not just one scene where he carries her. Fair. There are tons of scenes, like an extortionate amount of scenes dedicated to him being like, don't hurt the mermaid, right? But it's just never goes deeper than that. That's the issue. It's not that there's not enough of them. It's that none of them do anything beyond that surface level idea. And like I said to you at the beginning, this is the plot that I 100% am like bringing the banhammer down on in terms of like criticizing this script, because it's absolutely fucking atrocious. The worst part of the movie by a mile. And I think the real problem there is just simply the depth of it. It's like,
yeah.
What's his character? Well, he loves her. What's her character? She seems to love him. Okay. Why is that? Because he protects her. Okay, I guess.
Is she saving him? Is she got some mermaid medication down there? Is she making him a merman? I guess that's my interpretation of it, but not only... It's so insulting.
It's open-ended too,
Not only have you wasted our time with this bullshit and had her also inexplicably give the cups to Jack for no fucking reason. Like, not only because, we've got a character there, like, how do we get the cups back to him?
I like that, because what I think the movie did do, which he's present in the script, is there's a moment early on before religious guy Philip, the missionary guy, whatever, has saved her a bunch of times, where she indicates that she trusts him, and he's kind of like, why? And she kind of indicates she can tell the difference between a good person and a bad person, like mermaid magic, right? So at the end of the movie, when she gives those cups to Jack, I think that's actually a really clever choice, because Jack's the person she trusts with her magic mermaid sense of morality and ability to detect the goodness in people, the way she picked it up in Philip. The idea that she gives it to Jack actually solidifies Jack's position in this story, and actually their wider understanding of Jack as a character, as a series of movies. That he's ultimately, Jack's a good person, and I actually really like that element of it. As random as it feels in the moment, the second I thought about it, I went, nope, they set that up. That is literally a setup and payoff for her. But this is exactly the problem with the love story. The love story gets in the way of the function of those two characters, because I think when you're writing this script and you create Philip is supposed to be anti-Blackbeard, right? He is supposed to be the yardstick in which you're measuring Blackbeard against. Right early on in the movie, when Philip's been freed and he's talking to Blackbeard, he's saying, you know, anyone can be saved, and Blackbeard's like, not everyone. I ain't being saved. I'm fucking evil through and through, right? And that's interesting. That's a really interesting dynamic you've set up there between Blackbeard and Philip, because Philip believes in inherent good and morality and like doing the right thing, and he believes anyone can be saved. You've got a guy who believes that not only can that people are fundamentally selfish and evil, but believes that because he is himself that in Blackbeard. Why are we not keep those two together? Why are we spending all this time having Philip save the mermaid and be in love with the mermaid, when any scene after the initial time he saves her, because you can do it once, because then that's him proving his point about being good and, you know, moral and what have you. And you get Blackbeard making a wry comment the first time it happens about how he's protecting the fish or whatever. I can't remember exactly what he says. Why do we not explore that more? We have a mermaid who can tell us with mermaid magic who the good and bad people are. So we're going to use her to tell us Jack's a good person, and we're using Philip to tell us how much of a bad person Blackbeard is. This is genius. These two characters are perfectly positioned to do that. But instead, half of their scenes are them talking to each other. Because they've decided there's a love story there. Because I guess they finished the script and went, you know what, we don't have a love story, because Jack's.
That's what it feels like. It feels like them going, a pirates movie needs a Will and Elizabeth.
Right.
So let's give. What if one of them was a mermaid?
Yeah, and it feels like, but it feels like instead of inventing two characters for that to be their purpose, they looked at the script they already had, saw two smaller characters that had a role in informing us about the two main characters, which is arguably Jack and Blackbeard in this, protagonist, antagonist. Arguably, it's a messy script in that sense. These pirates movies all are, because people's sides are always switching. The movie's never had a clear, this is the hero, this is the protagonist sort of character. I think it's always been flexible across these films, so that's fine. But yeah, I think what they did, which I think is an even bigger crime, is taking two characters that were there to help bring those characters into the forefront and help us learn more about them, and made them the love story as well as that. So these two characters that don't get a massive amount of screen time not only now have to be the things they were originally designed to be in the script, but they also have to be the script's love story, because you can't make the script's love story Jack and Angelica, because what we've established is Jack will always run away from that. So we're in a weird situation where, as much as it makes sense for Jack's character to not do that, they've sort of shot themselves in the foot, because I feel like they were drafting this script and going like, well, here's our love story, it's Jack Angelica, and then going, oh no, but the whole point of this is Jack will never actually commit to that, as we demonstrate with our final scene, for better or worse. Shit. What do we do? All right, well, we got the missionary guy and we got the mermaid, and we'll make them fall in love.
Well, I like
that's why that's so
paper
thin,
I
think.
They also then need to, and this might be because this is an element where I'm like, I wanted to go back and like check whether I'm right on this, but I also like that not only have you got missionary fella, someone needs to let him escape. So am I remembering this right? That they also have like another guy on the crew who's kind of good, but we don't spend any time with him, so we just occasionally like cut to him.
There's like
and
a
then
young
he lets
boy.
him out. Yeah, like this young lad, and you're like, who the fuck's he? And you're like, why are they occasionally showing this fella? And it's because at the end they need someone to tie him out, to let him out.
Yes.
Like, oh, come on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for like characters that just they exist for small roles. So you make sure that you establish they're present, so that when they have a small role later in the film, there's nothing wrong with characters having different levels of involvement, but it's the lack of subtlety to it. I think that's the problem. But I'll be honest with you, that comes down. That is definitely directing, because the choice to keep editing in shots of that kid reacting to everything happening is an absolutely directing decision. 100%. Yeah.
There's something wrong, I think, with little parts that go nowhere if you're wasting incredible talent on them. This movie does it 3 times. Judi Dench, which to be fair, I think is deliberately a fun cameo. Richard Griffiths as the king, which again, to be fair, is only ever going to be in that scene. But the one that is, really egregious on reflection, just because of how talented they are, is Stephen Graham. Who's great but wasted.
Yeah, but I think that's... I'll be honest with you. Is the Stephen Graham character any different from Mackenzie Crook doing his character in the previous Pirates movies?
Yeah, well, that's part of my problem with them. It felt like him and Christopher Fairbanks, which I guess, to be fair, maybe I'm just saying that because I really noticed it was Christopher Fairbanks, because I like him as an actor, and I like it when he pops up in movies. I like, Guardians 1 for me was just like, hey, it's Chris Fairbanks, and he's in 3 as well. He's that guy. For those wondering, and he was in Aliens 3 and stuff as well. Batman, he's in 89 Batman. But with those two characters, for me, I'm like watching it going, well, this is just, you might as well have brought or tried to bring back Mackenzie Crook and the other guy, because that's who these two characters are.
Right.
So you might as well have tried to bring them back.
I mean, I agree, and I think it's a really good chance, Chris. That's who it was on the script, on paper.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I know that for sure, obviously, but do you not think that Stephen Graham and the guy he's with, those two characters, I think one's called Scrum. I've forgotten the name of the guy that he's sometimes with, but it wouldn't surprise me if in an early draft of this script they were intending to bring back those two characters and then couldn't get the actors in question, which is fair enough. I think when you've done 3, coming back for a 4th, I understand any actor choosing not to be involved in this movie, right? That makes sense to me. And I think considering the lack of, when you've made Will and Elizabeth sort of the sort of moral and practical center of the previous 3 movies, like they are the characters that experience the most growth. Because as you pointed out when we reviewed the first one, I thought it was such an astute observation. You very clearly said Jack almost should never grow in the same way. That's why you have a Will, and that's why you have an Elizabeth. They get to go on the arc. Jack gets to be a constant, right? He's a force of chaos and nature. He's a bit like the Doctor in that way, I think is how you described it. And again, an extremely astute observation. And they have stuck to that. Jack has not grown in these movies. And as much as I don't care for the scene, they do demonstrate it by his choice at the end to abandon Angelica on the island. That is the movie doing its Simpsons between episodes reset. You know what I mean? So I'm in a position here where maybe one of the bigger issues with this movie is not finding an actual character to be at the center of this in the way Will and Elizabeth were. That is the bigger crime here. Yeah, because that's maybe we didn't have. Maybe the reason you felt unconnected and like you didn't care too much about Angelica as a character, or Philip and Serena, we talked about why they don't work, but maybe the reason is just that they didn't get the They were sort of written as characters alongside Jack rather than Will and Elizabeth, which were written as if they were the main characters, even if structurally they weren't the main characters. That's actually a really interesting choice. I'm thinking back to those first three movies. If we're talking about like time on screen and whose story we are telling, just practically, structurally, it's Jack. We follow Jack, right? But when you actually go to the like, who's growing, whose story is this? It is Will and Elizabeth's. And I don't think I can think of many movies that do that, where the person who is center of the story is not the same as the person who's doing all the growing.
Yeah, and I think for the first film, I think we follow Elizabeth quite. Do you know what I mean? Like, it starts on Elizabeth. It's about her journey. But yeah, I think once we do the opening scene,
everything then is from Jack's perspective, right? And we see everything from Jack's side of the story after that. Because we go off with Jack on the adventure while she's still home, right? Before she comes and joins them on the adventure. There's a point when she gets kidnapped. Yeah. There's a point when she gets kidnapped, and we don't necessarily initially see what's happening with that. We cut off to Jack, and we're following Jack. Then we come back to her. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Because there is the scene where she's on the ship, and she discovers Barbossa is, a ghostly, skeletal horror man.
Jack's always with Will, so you could make an argument it's Will, who's obviously in the first scene as well. You could argue the toss either way on that. I think there is a point of this movie naturally, because they want to make the bucks. This movie is taking a character that is certainly, whichever way you toss it, is not, has never been a main antagonist as the way they are trying to be here. Although that intro, I fucking hate that intro. Like, seeing him dressed as a judge, it's just so obvious and like, ugh. But to pay a compliment, Dan, and to continue talking about Jack, I thoroughly enjoy the escape scene when he escapes from the king. Because, specifically, not necessarily the action within it, but it is, for me, the best execution of who Jack is. You see him glance at the window, you see him glance around, in disguised in all the madness, the fact that he is pissing about with the chains to the point where the king just goes, "Oh, just take them off him," and he gets let out of the chains. Like, in that scene, what appears to be haphazard, crazy Jack Sparrow madness is a methodical plan that he has come up with cleverly on the spot, but it's all being disguised as mad Jack Sparrow-ness. And that is, for me, what should be the heart of the character. What we should, it doesn't aggrieve me as much as I imagine it might some people, but him leaping from trees like he's fucking Spider-Man. I don't particularly like that.
I did write a note about that. I just very quickly, it's CGI rope swinging from trees. Blah. Not under Verbinski.
Yeah. I don't like that shit. But it's for me, it's like, equally, I'm not outraged by it. It's not as much as the love story, but that for me is a bad example of what that is going, well, Jack's our hero, let's have him be a hero. But that escape scene is like, this is at the heart of Jack Sparrow through all these movies, and in my opinion is the best execution and the most interesting execution of Jack Sparrow. That clever thinking being disguised as drunk pirate madness is fantastic, and it's done really well in that scene.
Yeah, and I think it's like the writers sort of latched on to that idea, that joke from the last movie. I think it's Jack Davenport's character says, do you think he... Oh no, someone says it to Jack Davenport. Do you think he makes it up, or do you think it's all part of the plan? And there's this weird question mark over Jack's sort of chaotic way of getting himself in and out of scrapes. And I think it's like the writers went, let's actually, for the first time, show it from Jack's perspective, basically. Let's actually put into the script the setup that then leads to the chaos. Let's show him dropping the napkin that the guy will later slip on. Let's show him his eye line going to the window, going to the balcony he's ultimately going to get to. Let's show him throwing the food up to the chandelier so that he can have that as he leaves. Like, actually, it's like getting to see it from his perspective, maybe for the first time. Like this notion that this is what he's been doing all along, but it comes across to the observer as chaos. But actually, there is a certain amount of planning that goes into what Jack does. And the reason Jack continues to survive and continues to be a reasonably successful pirate, at least to some degree, is because of this. And I 100% agree with you. It's one of the best sequences in the movie. Absolutely. I think it's a really, really fun idea, and it is executed really well. I think they did a really good job with it, and obviously credit as well to I'm assuming, well, you never know. I guess you'd have to find the script, but Rob Marshall obviously, at least here, has put those things, competently to camera, because that is hard to communicate, because you want me to understand. You're not just showing me the window, but that Jack is moving his glance to the window and back to the balcony, right? You want me to see and understand that. And so the way those shots are put together works really well in tandem with what's been what's been written there. And I think that's is probably the closest in the whole movie I come to feeling like a human being is actually directing it, because I tell you what, the perfect example of his directing being flat and uninteresting. Let's talk about the fucking fight, the sword fight that takes place roughly in the same section of the movie as the Will and Jack blacksmith's office fight from the first one. Not the workshop, guys. The office, the blacksmith's office. We got Jim. We got Jim in the background glancing at the camera like these two, eh?
Absolutely, the office. I heard nothing else.
Let's talk then about the sword fight between Jack and Angelica. That's the beginning of the movie when we first reveal her to be in the Jack Sparrow guise, and he goes in and they have a sword fight. Do you remember anything that happens in that sword fight?
Nah,
no. Several minutes long.
I remember at one point they go on beams, and I was like, "Oh, this is literally ripping off." The first movie.
Yeah. The only thing I can tell you right now, having watched this movie less than 24 hours ago, I remember that at some point Jack jumps over a barrel. Because he sort of scrambles over it. It's not a clean jump. He sort of does a Jack Sparrowy scramble. And I think the only reason that visually is committed to my brain, Chris, is because Johnny Depp does a bit of physical comedic acting as he gets over the barrel. What about the fight scene at the end? What about there's a bunch of sword fights. Barbossa and Blackbeard have a big epic sword fight. Chris, can you tell me a single thing other than the outcome that happens during that fight?
No. Not at all.
This is why I think it's harder. I'm not saying it's the only reason, but I do think this is one of the big reasons it's hard to invest in this movie. It's so flat. I think, it's so flat.
What we talked a lot about in the previous 3 episodes for the previous 3 movies was your newfound hard-on for Gore Verbinski. And I think what we've learned here is if you had a newfound hard-on for Gore Verbinski, then Rob Marshall's made you impotent. Is what we've discovered, I think.
Rob Marshall's How I Last Longer.
Rob Marshall, what, sorry?
I'm not going to repeat that joke. That's the worst joke I've ever said.
I didn't hear you. I would love to repeat it.
Rob Marshall is How I Last Longer.
Yeah,
but it's not. But genuinely,
I agree.
It's so night and day. It was incredible to start watching this movie because look, I know what Rob Marshall's job is, but I saw Little Mermaid. It's competently put together. I saw what's the other one he did? The other big Disney one, Mary Poppins Returns. Competently put together. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just not very auteur, but it's fine. This one was the first Rob Marshall movie I've watched where I was really like, oh no, this guy has no vision. There's nothing to this. It's so you could have literally hired just a camera guy to like come in and be like, okay, put the cameras there. Like there's no voice. There's no.
Do you think that's partly? Do you think that's partly? Because look, I didn't. This is one of those things where I don't particularly disagree with you. I just don't. I don't know if I care as much about that. But do you think? So I'm not. And I'm just kind of. We've talked a lot about this Rob Marshall thing, so I think it's. I'm trying to deliberately. Poke at it and present an alternative for the purpose of discussion, as opposed to necessarily being, a diehard Rob Marshall fan. Although I think my memory of Mary Poppins Returns was like you, that it was good. It was a good movie, I think. You know what? Have I even seen it? Maybe I'm talking bollocks. Because I think in my head, when I think of Mary Poppins Returns, I also think of the Emma Thompson biopic about the author of Mary Poppins, which is fantastic. I did enjoy that.
Yes, incredible.
But I think I've seen.
Was it Saving Mr. Banks?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I've seen Mary Poppins Returns and thought it was all right. But anyway, do you think part of that is the fact that the context of which we're watching this is the fourth movie, and the first three are so altered? Like I said earlier, like 'em or loathe 'em, he made some fucking decisions in those movies,
right.
and a lot of this also feels like, and this I think is in everything, is this is in the script by the fact that I think there's a real issue of this movie just going, well, people liked that, let's do it again. So in the script, we literally have lines repeated. Have you threatened me before? And all that sort of shit. We have dialogue that is, sorry, he says at the end. Even it's like at the end where he's like, well, it's a pirate's life for me, savvy? And it's like, oh, we've got to the end of the movie and he's not said that, so let's just have him say it at the end and put the two
right. But again, can I tell you very quickly together on that one? The thing is, he improvised savvy. So when he put it in the previous movies, felt natural, and that's because the vibe that was created very much on set was improvise. Do what you want. If you've got an idea, stick it in, and we'll go. We'll just do it. And again, I do think that comes down to the director. But yeah, carry on. Sorry.
In the action, it feels like the mermaid sequence in particular. And I agree with you on it's an interesting idea, but the directing of the mermaid scene, I don't think makes it as spectacular as it could be. But again, that feels like, well, the other films had the will and we had set pieces, so we need a set piece. Let's do mermaids. And it's just not firing on all cylinders on any stretch. And the other big one for me of fucking trying to replicate what's gone before. Fuck me. Look, it's a good refrain, right? It's a good song. It's great, like it's fantastic, but fuck me is it overused in this movie, especially in the first half. Every action scene has the Pirates theme on it, and I'm like, geez, you are overusing this, and it is therefore not creating. It's not doing what it should do because you are overusing it. Because people it's fucking epic, but it's not epic if it's played on every fucking action scene.
Yeah. I don't know who that comes down to, but again, we in the previous movie we did have a lot of triv specific about the use of the songs and when it was put in, and it was at Verbinski's insistence. He chose to edit to the song when he needed it. So I do wonder again if that's another element of just his. But getting to your original question, because I agree with a lot of what you just said. So there's no point in me repeating that. I think it definitely hurts Rob Marshall that we're doing it this way, 100%. Because how do you expose a director, or what would expose a director without much voice of their own? Well, you would let them follow up 3 movies directed by someone with a really, really distinct, clear voice. Because that will absolutely throw into sharp focus the lack of one. 100%. All day, every day. Yeah. And whether that's made me react stronger or not, maybe, but I don't think it makes anything that I'm concerned about here or complaining about here less true. It certainly makes it's shone a big old light on it in a way that hasn't done before. Because, like I said, I saw Little Mermaid. I didn't love it, but I didn't dislike it. Like, it was fine. Yeah, same. And Mary Poppins Returns, same. There was some creative ideas. in the script. It was shot competently. Like there was a movie that was shot well enough. Like it was lit right, and the scenes worked physically. Nothing wrong with it. But again, a little bit flat, and I don't think about it. It comes and it goes, right? But then when you make him direct the fourth movie in a franchise, suddenly it becomes clear why I just think the other movies are fine that we talked about and don't love them. And while so what I'm saying is essentially, I think you're right. I do think the other movies being directed by someone with such a clear idea of what these movies should be and such a clear vision, whether you agree with that vision or not, whether you love the Pirates movies or not, as you yourself, Chris said, and whether you in the first part of that was the audience, not you, Chris. Whether you love or hate these films, there's no denying Verbinski has a voice and a style and a tone that he's going for, and that he is executing clearly. And I 100% do not feel that here at all. That is a real shame.
Here's a little game called 3 Quick Questions and a Comment, although I think the second question is probably going to be maybe a longer discussion for that. Is there anything in the triv about what the fuck the Judi Dench cameo is about?
No.
How it happened, why it happened. Okay, well that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit strange. Yeah, I can try and find out why is Judi Dench in. Yeah. Well, let's find out. I'm going to Google it while you make your next comment and question.
Well, it's a question for you. So if you can multitask, feel free. Do you think Johnny Depp's as good in this movie?
No.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think again that comes down to the lack of being able to improvise, because there's a weird sort of like unpredictability to Jack Sparrow in the previous movies, where you just never know what he's exactly going to do. Like that moment where the feather hits him on the face during their like standoff at the end of the first movie, and he sort of like bats it out of his way in a panicky way, and then gets back in. He's still in character the whole time, and he whizzes around and that wasn't intended to happen, but he reacted naturally as Jack to it. Whereas here, it feels like they're following the script letter for letter, which is why.
But do we know for sure that he? Is there not a possibility that that's either he's been told to improvise less, or he's less excited by it, and he isn't improvising as much by his own choice? Do we know for sure that's a choice that was directed to him?
No, I don't think that. No, I think improvisation and how much you can improvise on set is, generally speaking, to my understanding, with the director, in terms of like, it's either encouraged or discouraged. Like, Kevin Smith famously discourages improvising on his sets. He's like, get the script. Judd Apatow, famously, the opposite way, right? His movies, he very much creates a vibe of, we'll get what's on the page, and then we'll try it a few different ways until we get something that works, and we're happy with, and, we'll just play around with it. We'll have some on-set fun. So I think if, as a director, you're coming in, you're like, right, we've got 6 shots to get today, we're going to shoot this, we're going to shoot this, we're going to shoot this. And every time you get the exact take that's the script and you're moving on, you're creating that tone of that. And that is usually where it comes from. Usually, I'm not.
We
saying
don't know for
always,
sure.
We don't know exactly.
There's no triv to suggest that. Definitely,
100%. We don't know that's where that comes from here. We do know from the trivia from the previous weeks that Verbinski very much encouraged it, because that is directly what people have said and what was been evidenced by the multiple moments that the triv revealed were improvisations rather than decided in the script well ahead of time. Tons of those across all the movies. So we know Verbinski encouraged it. We do not know that Rob Marshall discouraged it. We do not know whether that was just we're trying to keep this under budget thing. It could very well be that it was Disney's choice. Do less faffing about on set to save money, because we don't know how successful this will be. So maybe he was just doing his job. Like as I said, Disney tend to just bring him in to make the projects they want in the way that they want, and he very much is considered to be a bit of a yes man for that, and that's fine. People need to work. Nothing against him personally. That's absolutely a choice in a way that I think he's made a bunch of really successful movies for Disney. Let's not shit on that. There's room in this world for people who come in to do their job, and TV directors, generally speaking, are brought in for that exact reason. They come in to keep the tone of the show consistent and not fiddle with the process. They just come in, they call action, they call cut, they work with the actors, but the production is all handled by the same people that do it every week, right? So that's how. So there's nothing. I'm not objecting to that as a process in the general sense, but in this example, I do think that was a mistake because the first films had such creativity to them. But for whatever reason, whether it came from Marshall, whether it came from the tone on the set, whether it came from Disney looking to not allow them the time in each shot to do multiple takes to get improvisations, wherever it came from, it's fucking clear it didn't happen here. Madly clear. The movie feels like it's the script brought to screen exactly as it was written. There is no sense of unpredictability to it. There's no sense of that chaos to it that comes with the movies that are a bit more improvised. And I think that really, really specifically hurts Jack Sparrow. I don't think it hurts the other characters in the same way at all, but I do think it hurts Jack Sparrow massively. So yeah.
My other comment, Ian McShane's pretty fucking good, isn't he? In this,
I love Ian McShane so much.
Yeah, really good.
I think he's. He wouldn't have been my go-to if Blackbeard. If someone had said you're casting Blackbeard, I don't think Ian McShane would have occurred to me, if I'm being completely honest with you. But fuck me, does he do a good job. One of my favourite scenes in the whole movie, which we haven't discussed, and one of the ones that has some of the most creative ideas in it, regardless of how it's shot, is the ship responding to the sword the first time it happens, when we introduce Blackbeard. So for those who don't recall, there's a mutiny on the ship led by Jack, the Queen Anne's Revenge, which is Blackbeard's ship, because he doesn't believe Blackbeard is there. He thinks it's a ploy of some sort, even though they've already seen his famous zombified crew members, but whatever. Jack, or maybe Jack was doing that. Maybe Jack knew full well Blackbeard was on the ship and he was just misleading the crew to create the mutiny because he knew they wouldn't do it if they were too scared of Blackbeard. So maybe actually that's part of Jack's sort of double bluffing or whatever. But there's a big mutiny and it ends with Blackbeard coming out, and with the few waves of his sword, all the ropes tie up the crew. And there's a guy that tries to jump off the ship, and the ropes come down and grab him and pull him up. Really, really cool. And there's so much gravitas to that scene. And Ian McShane, the way he comes onto the screen with all that energy and charisma, it's great. You genuinely he feels like a big threat in that moment. So yeah,
for sure. And he feels like a good degree of sort of, again, just menace, but also this sort of unhinged approach. And he does feel very threatening throughout the entire movie. I think he's got a presence for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And he's got a really clear I think a really clear sort of characterization. You understand that character pretty much from minute one, and he very rarely shifts from that position. He's very consistently written, I think. He's not a particularly complex character, I would argue, but I don't think he's designed to be. I think he's designed to be the antagonist in that very clear way, because he's there to throw a light on Jack as a contrast. So I think that's pretty good. I've got the answer to the Judi Dench question. Would you like to know?
I'd love it.
So she'd worked with both Rob Marshall and Johnny Depp fairly well, not that recently with Depp. So she worked with Johnny Depp in the year 2000 in the movie Chocolat. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because it is written that way without the I fucking hate the fact that movie's called that. Anyway, but she'd just worked with Rob Marshall a year or two before on a movie called Nine from 2009. So they were all buddies. So I guess that was an easy, okay. Just we've got a role. Do you want to come in for a day? Famous film director.
Well, I think.
Oh yeah. So the movie Nine is. I don't actually know much about the movie Nine, so I just quickly looked it up. Yeah, this doesn't look great. It's got Daniel Day-Lewis in the lead though. Aha, and Penelope Cruz. Interesting.
You should check it out, Dan. I think that this experience has given you a real appreciation for for Rob Marshall's work.
Yeah.
You've come out a big fan. You should,
Hey, look,
watch it.
One of the things I always credit Wes Anderson for is that he must be like really, really good and easy to work with, because actors gravitate towards his work and will take way less than they're normally paid to do a Wes Anderson movie, right? That's the thing we talk about. Looking at this cast list, for 9, Daniel Day-Lewis, Marion Cotillard, Penelope Cruz, Nicole Kidman. Actors like to work with him. He must be a really nice, pleasant guy to work with. He must be, have a really consistent sort of like tone on set that's comfortable and in control, and like that, as a director, people clearly are gravitating to his productions. We talked about this is always that balance, isn't it? Those sort of mad geniuses that bring chaos wherever they go. There's lots of talk of like back in the day when Dan Harmon was running Community, scripts turning up really late. Sometimes that kind of creativity comes hand in hand with a certain amount of stress and chaos from a practical production standpoint, because they're not a steady hand. And then you look at what was I had another example in my head, but it's just slipped away as I was talking. Oh yeah, we look at this franchise. Look at Zoe Saldana's experience working on Gore Verbinski's set, right? So to Rob Marshall's credit, like he clearly he's clearly a very steady hand. It's clearly a functional production with very minimal chaos, and like people clearly enjoy working with him. So yeah, getting messages from Nadia. He is really nice to work with. On the space film, they ate dinner together every night and then messed about. I assume she means Wes Anderson.
Yeah, because I don't. He hasn't. Rob Marshall's not done a space film, has he?
Asteroid City, right? Yeah.
Every night they eat dinner together at a big table, like everyone.
There you go.
And afterwards they all like sing and dance and play games and just muck about.
There you go. So Nadia said that the story from, she said that girl from Stranger Things. I can't remember which girl from Stranger Things is in Asteroid City.
The one who wears a sailor outfit, and then she doesn't want to dance when the guy sits doing the song, but then she's like, it's such a banger, it's time.
This doesn't make for good podcast. No one can hear you, and I'm not going to repeat your whole description of the scene and the person whose name you don't remember.
I will do it then.
Okay.
Quick hit me.
What's that, sorry? Yeah, you can hear you, go.
Oh, okay. So it's the girl, and in Stranger Things she wears a sailor outfit, and in Asteroid City she doesn't want to dance when the boy sings a song, but it's such a banger she has to dance, so she looks so reluctant when she dances, and she's like ba, 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 ba. And then the cowboy comes and dances with her because he's in love with her.
I've seen Asteroid City.
Yeah, that one. Yes, this girl.
Yeah. I found her on Google. I'm trying to find the actress's name.
She's a Nepo baby.
Maya Hawke?
Yeah, Nepo baby.
So yeah, okay. Thank you. So Maya Hawke apparently has said in interviews she had a very good time on the set of Wes Anderson's Asteroid City. That is what the conclusion we've come to.
What a better film than Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah. A better film than Pirates of the Caribbean, Nadia has added as she left. I didn't love Asteroid City. I thought Asteroid City was fine. But yeah, I was a little disappointed with it because it wasn't as good as his last movie. I much preferred The French Dispatch. But anyway. Yeah, wow. So yeah, so Judi Dench clearly was just happy to work with Rob Marshall again and came in. So that's how that happened. It's the longest way to get to that answer we've ever done.
Yeah. What are your other notes? Because I'm out of opinions on Stranger Tides personally.
I got a couple of compliments to play to the dialogue. There's some of my favorite dialogue in this whole franchise, I think, in this movie. Some really, really astute, like, on point dialogue, which actually, maybe that ends up on the screen. Maybe that ends up on the screen verbatim as a result of the lack of. Maybe there was some great lines that didn't quite make their way into the previous movies for the opposite reason to what we were just talking about. Pure speculation, obviously, but just it's funny to think. But yeah, someone at one point says to Jack, "Your words surround you like a fog, make you hard to see," which I think really hits the theme of this movie and the theme of that, or how they've characterized Jack as almost not wanting to get attached to anyone, not wanting to be really seen for who he actually is. He's mildly ashamed of actually wanting to help people sometimes. I also really enjoyed the line, "You're rescuing a damsel." That's a first. because obviously very rarely in these films do they have damsels. I thought that was a nice both meta nod at the film's lack of damsels, but also the unusual nature of Jack saving someone else. Usually he ends up getting into trouble. Thought that was fun. One of my favourite lines in the movie comes in one of my least favourite scenes. So the scene where he dumps her on the beach. She says, "I love you," and Jack geniusly replies with, "As do I. Always have, always will." I assume referring to himself.
Yeah, that was my read on it. But like you, I did also appreciate and enjoy that it could be read the other way, potentially.
That line, genuinely, Chris, like, if this was a better movie, that would be an iconic film line. That would be like, that is genuinely one of the best lines in any of these 4 movies. Like, it's so good. That is so good. What a perfect response to a character like Jack responding to "I love you." As do I. It's great. It's so good. What else did I... Oh, there's they do put in the dialogue later on as well. The moment when Barbossa asks the question about whether he needs to, they need to make a plan before they enter the building, or if they need to, if they're just going to. And Jack just does. Sometimes I improvise, which I thought was a nice way to sort of, if anyone doesn't like the notion that everything Jack does is deeply planned, like it's set up in the beginning of the movie, you can kind of see that as a sign that maybe sometimes he does make it up as he goes, just occasionally. But I think there's also an element of Jack waving it off as well there, though. Whereas I think you can take that any way you like, which is probably good. I think I wrote down the phrasing, and I think this is actually like, I'll save that for like a summary at the end, because actually I've written down, one of my notes is summarizes what I think the movie didn't work for me, or parts of the movie didn't work for me. Let's see.
Is it Rob Marshall's directing?
It's what I wrote was, the movie is missing the kinetic energy, spirit, and creativity of the previous ones. That's how I wrote it down. Like a solid script with no real spark is how I described it in my notes. I think we might have actually covered everything else. Let me have a look. We talked about that. Also, we were actually in time to do final summary. So yeah, for me, this is a recommend. I think I enjoyed this a lot more than I remembered, and I think maybe depending on the day, I might put this above World's End, because World's End is so messy. But what I'm really sad about is the potential for these ideas, this script, in Verbinski's hands. The movie is frustrating to watch in that respect, because it's shot so differently to the previous ones. I'm refraining from calling it blandly, because I think some people will tell me they think Rob Marshall did a great job here. I'm sure, but I doubt it, because this movie got absolutely panned at the box office, not at the box office, at the in the reviews. So question mark.
Yeah, I think I could see someone enjoying it, though, 'cause you know what I mean. If you, I agree with you. I think it amplifies some of the worst things about the sequels, but also it does address some of them as well. And I think if you're just after a turn your brain off summer blockbuster movie, then there's a world when you could really enjoy this, and see it as that, and see it as certainly less convoluted than the last two. So I would recommend, because there's the potential for that, but I don't by any means think it's a good movie.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, look, if you want the good Pirates movies, it's the first two, isn't it? Really, like, I think we were acknowledged. I think this always comes with the caveat of Pirates sequels not particularly loved.
Well, neither we've got a movie next week. Neither of us have seen, so we can't conclude that just yet. But yeah, certainly seems that way.
Yeah, the reviews for that were definitely not great. Funnily enough, I finally got that. I just refreshed, because my first bit of trivia, Chris, was related to the budget, and I really wanted to glance at that Forbes article to see if it corrects anything that I'm putting in here. But I'm having trouble. Yeah, interesting. Okay. Okay, well, okay, I'll come back to that in a second because there's some interesting stuff here. I don't know if that's it. Yeah, so it looks like officially Disney have reported the budget as 200 million, because the budget has been scaled down basically. Do we set up that we're in triv? It's trivia, everyone. Chris, do the thing.
Let's triv it up.
I'm gonna give you some trivia. Let's go. So the budget had to be scaled down. That was Disney's decision here. And again, why maybe Rob Marshall seems like a safe hands, because I think that makes real sense. If Disney are really being protective of it and looking to make the production, not as chaotic as we got that, that makes such good sense. So they wanted it no more than $200 million, because the budget of the previous one was $300 million, and basically a guy called Rich Ross, who was the studio president at the time, mandated that because of there's an economic slowdown for no reason at all in around 2007, 2008. So that when this guy came in and they were starting to make this movie, presumably in sort of 2009, 2010, that was the mandate. But looking at the Forbes article, let's see. That's really poor timing. Nadia's just texted me, but one sec.
Is it more thoughts on Asteroid City?
No, I don't think so. It's a shame. That's fine. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So having a look, basically, it's shot in the United Kingdom, and to make it eligible for a government film tax scheme, which entitles the movie to certain expenditures, they can claim back up to 20%. The expenses of the movie qualifying for the scheme that they put forward were more than has been reported elsewhere. So we don't know. Looking at it here, it's hard to distinguish what is what. Yeah, here you go. So this is the problem. So the companies tend to have code names for different productions when they do this, so people can't try and put it together. It's looking like, according to this, they filed for, where's the actual figure? I just had it in front of me. Yeah, the production, based on between... see, this is the problem. So this is why I doubt this now, actually, looking at it, because between 2009 and 2013, production costs were listed as £410 million, which is $240 million. So Forbes have it as $240 million, but they also have the production time as being past when it was actually shot. So what I'm assuming is other things were shot under that production code, which means this is a spurious figure, unfortunately.
But essentially it's unclear then.
Yeah, so actually, sorry, apologies, I mixed up the two. So $410 million, which would have been £240 million, which is what they suggested. But again, this movie came out in 2011, and this window in which they were filing for taxes was 2009 to 2013. So I think other productions may have come under that tax rebate for other stuff they shot in the UK during that period of time. So so all we can do is go by the other data we have, which suggests the movie was made for 200. So there you go. Sorry I had to sort of work that out on the fly while we were podcasting. Not the greatest way to figure it out, but we've got to the answer. What a strange thing that so many different places, including Wikipedia, claim that it's most expensive movie of all time when that's the data. I don't know if that really verifies anything, but anyway, fine.
I've no idea.
Yeah, Johnny Depp agreed to star in the movie before there was even a script. But he then sort of was a little less enthused when Dick Cook, who was the Disney chairman, was replaced by the guy we just talked about that mandated the budget be lower. Basically, he said his enthusiasm for the fourth Pirates movie reduced after Cook left. There's a fissure, a crack in my enthusiasm at the moment. It was all born in that office. And he's basically referring to the fact that Dick Cook, the previous guy at the studio, was one of the ones who supported Depp's weird sort of idea of who Jack should be. There was lots of talk in that first movie about Disney being unsure of what Depp was up to on set and how untraditional of a pirate Jack was. So I thought that was very interesting. He basically felt that this Dick Cook guy trusted him, and then when he was gone, it hurt Johnny's enthusiasm for it. But
Right.
Once he got on set, I assume they were just letting him be Jack Sparrow again. So, but again, I think it's interesting.
You'd think.
But again, tone on set is studio. The studio going to bring in their people and like have a certain amount of say in that, no matter what, aren't they? So yeah. So the movie was basically loosely based on a 1988 pirate novel on Stranger Tides by Tim Powers. And funnily enough, that novel's protagonist is also a pirate named Jack, but that is very specifically just a coincidence. They just took some of the larger ideas about the Fountain of Youth basically from that book. Penelope Cruz apparently was the only choice for the role of Angelica. She agreed to the role without reading a script. Again, I think, already worked with Rob Marshall, and I think also like a certain amount of trust in that development. Again, another backup there that the actors seem to really enjoy working with him because she was happy to do it without even seeing a script, which I think is unusual. So this is going to make you laugh, Chris. But Stephen Graham was recommended to the director to play Scrum after Johnny Depp worked with him in Public Enemies, 2009. Right. So they worked on on that movie together, and then Depp was like, "Yeah, he's a really talented actor. He should play this weird comedic pirate guy.
He should play this unrewarding pirate role."
But yeah, I thought that's fun, and you know what? I genuinely think Stephen Graham's having fun in this role, whether it's like a good or important role or not. I think Stephen Graham's having a good time, so I'm happy for him. I'll take that.
That's fair.
Yeah, Richard Griffiths was also recommended for the role of King George by Johnny Depp, because Depp was a big fan of Withnail and I, and really liked Richard Griffiths' character in that.
Yeah. That sounds like Johnny Depp had a lot of power at this point, didn't he? Do you know what I mean? I like this film. Let's cast him. All right.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if there's a balance there, isn't there? Like when the movie star is big enough and the role is small enough. Does that make sense? Like I don't feel like Johnny Depp would have get to handpick who played Angelica or who played Will and Elizabeth in the previous movies. But for a role that's in one scene, all right, Johnny wants to work with this guy. Fine, it's one scene. The guy can't fuck up the whole movie, right?
And he doesn't. He's very good. He's Richard Griffiths.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, from the perspective of the studio, who are like just getting a name from Johnny Depp, like even if their worst fear is realised, it's one scene, right? But Richard Griffiths is an amazing King George in this. He's really good. He's really good. So apparently, Bill Nighy expressed interest in the early rumblings of this movie being put together in returning as Davy Jones. Thought there might be a possibility of resurrecting the character, but it never materialised. I think wisely. I think that's smart.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the other alternatives before they landed on Ian McShane for Blackbeard was Alfred Molina. I could see that. I like Alfred Molina. That would have been good.
Yeah, I think he'd do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think there's a world where he'd do a great job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very talented actor. Would have been a lot of fun. I'm glad we got who we got. Ian McShane obviously does a wonderful job, but yeah, I certainly wouldn't have. If we'd have gotten the other version, I don't think that would have hampered the film. Or I think that we'd have had an equally talented actor doing a really good version of the film. According to director Rob Marshall, Ian McShane was chosen because he can play evil, but there's always humour behind it as well. McShane apparently accepted the job both due to a funny and charming script, but also the opportunity to work with Marshall. So again, signs that actors really love working with Rob Marshall. So there's lots of that coming as we go through this trip, isn't there? Apparently, Megan Fox was considered for the role of Serena, which is the sort of main mermaid. No. no, that would have been distracting, I think.
Yeah,
She was very much like a woman of the moment, you know, in the sort of late 2000s, early, you know what I mean? Like, it would have just felt like we put Megan Fox in here because she seems to be popular right now. It wouldn't have felt like necessarily she was a good fit for the character.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem with that is that character is so badly written that also people would have just been like, that was weird. Why was Megan Fox playing such a, you know, or underutilized character?
Yeah, agreed. So apparently Rob Marshall. This is funny. I don't know what the thinking is here, but apparently Rob Marshall invited the Spanish-French actress Astrid Burgess-Frisbey, hope I'm pronouncing that right, to play Serena after seeing her in a French magazine article on up-and-coming actresses. Now, that implies he offered her the role based on seeing she was an up-and-coming actress, rather than in like an actual audition. Now,
that certainly seems to be the implication there, for sure.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to assume that that's just poorly written trivia, because there's no way they gave that role to someone that was literally on-screen tested, right? That seems insane. Do you not think that seems crazy? Because it's not.
It seems mad.
It's not a lead role, but it's still a fairly prominent role. Like, you can take a risk on King George, who has one scene. You know what I mean? Like, that's fine. Do you know what I mean? There's very little that, you know, can do to be a problem if the actor doesn't work out, right? If Johnny Depp actually chose someone not suited to the role, which he didn't, obviously we talked about that, but, you know, that seems risky. So I'm going to assume there was some sort of, at least, you know, a minimal amount of auditioning that went on there, or at least they brought her in for a
there has to be. It would be. Yeah, it would be crazy for there not to be. There has to be.
So I'm going to assume that trivia is just phrased a little poorly. But what's really interesting about this actress is she didn't actually... she wasn't natively an English speaker at all. Astrid Burgess-Frisbey, who plays that character. So she had to take English lessons and swimming and breath control lessons to play the character, because she wasn't particularly much of a swimmer, and obviously the huge scenes or long scenes underwater, so a lot of learning how to like hold her breath and stuff. I thought that was really interesting and really
fair
and shows
fair play to her for that commitment.
Exactly, yeah, it shows a lot of hard work on her part. So I'm on board with that. I think that's cool. During filming in London, I do like this. So this is one of those, like, that Johnny Depp. He doesn't know how to win over a crowd, doesn't he? During filming in London, Jack Sparrow... oh, wait, no, that's the wrong piece of trivia. Where is it? Okay, so while filming in London, Johnny Depp received a letter from a local 9-year-old schoolgirl telling him that her classmates wanted to mutiny against her teachers. He then turned up to the school with basically no warning, in full Captain Jack Sparrow outfit, but advised against mutiny.
You gotta love that, haven't you?
Yeah.
I love the fact as well that he went and advised against a mutiny. Like, that's cool.
Yeah. I'm on board with that. You know, he is a master of, like, and I'm not saying this was like a manipulation of sorts, but like I you know, he is better, I think, than a lot of actors at like knowing exactly what to do to win the public over in any given situation.
Yeah,
he's been very good at doing that over the years, whether deliberate or not. That made for good headlines for sure, and a very positive impression of him. You know, maybe in the moment he was just being a nice guy and doing something for fun, but it certainly had the effect of winning him support. So during filming in London, a Captain Jack Sparrow impersonator was able to just walk onto the set. He looked so much like the character. He looked so much like the character. Guards did not think to ask for any ID at all.
That's fucking brilliant. That's fantastic.
I do enjoy that. Now, you may have noticed, Chris, because I certainly did, that they were being very odd with the camera choices when shooting Penelope Cruz's Angelica. I kept thinking they were framing her shots in a weird way. It turns out I was right, because she was pregnant throughout production, And while it didn't become noticeable until towards the end of production when the baby bump grew, it did cause difficulties for wardrobe. So the producers enlisted the help of her younger sister, Monica, for wide shots. And then Penelope filmed all the close-ups and the facial stuff and the dialogue herself. But for any long-distance scenes, her sister doubled for her. Yeah, you can tell. You can absolutely tell.
Yeah, you can tell, but equally, you know, I wouldn't want her to have lost a job because she was pregnant. So yeah, I think you can tell, but fair play. I think that's a good decision for her.
100%. Yeah, absolutely behind that. It was interesting because I was watching the movie and I couldn't put my finger on what the problem was, because it was, you know what it was? It was right towards the end when it really stood out. There are a bunch of shots when she's like on the ground and they're doing the whole sequence with the cups and the water and the switcheroo. And I just kept thinking, like, what a weird place to put the camera. Like, it's like her head and shoulders, but she's lying on the ground, but she's lying on the ground in this really awkward way that just, like, were they trying to communicate she's, like, still not well, or because she's injured because of the poison? But even if you were doing that, would you shoot it exactly? There was something about it. I couldn't put my finger on it. So when I read that trivia, I was like, oh, fine. Okay, I get it now. Because I was like, it was driving me crazy. Just specifically in that scene. And I couldn't even put my finger on what the problem was. I was just like, no, I just don't think you'd normally shoot it like this. And I couldn't work out why. I still can't even tell you what's physically wrong with it. Like, I'm not, I'm not one of those, like, I studied filmmaking, but I ultimately did screenwriting, right? My college course was filmmaking, but I ended up going into screenwriting. So I couldn't technically tell you what was wrong with the shot. But I'm sure someone who's more experienced in filmmaking will tell me why that shot bothered my eyes so much. But I was just like, there's just something wrong about the framing of this. It's not normal, and I can't. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Another pretty slick move from Mr. Depp. He bought waterproof jackets for all 500 crew members on set to protect them from the cold weather. He spent a total of $64,000 from his own pocket to do so. Cool move.
Yeah, fair play.
Good work.
Yeah. Does make you wonder why it's a shame he had to do that as opposed to the production, but fair play to him.
That's a really good fucking point. But you know what? Actually, no, we know exactly why, don't we? Disney said 200 million and not a fucking penny more. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I'm guessing that's why that ended up happening, which is a shame. Yeah, so in May 2010, Disney announced that the movie would be filmed using 3D cameras. The visual effects, however, were rendered in 2D and converted to 3D to keep the budget lower. That is what it is. This is a fascinating one, Chris. This movie caused a lot of frustration, controversy. Not controversy. Controversy sounds like something was like wrong. But a lot of problems in Germany. There was petitions and everything. The reason being, the first three movies, Johnny Depp had been dubbed by a German voice actor called Markus Off, and his performance became absolutely iconic and beloved within Germany. Now, due to contractual differences, Disney didn't hire Off for On Stranger Tides. Instead, they turned to a gentleman called David Nathan, who had famously, in Germany, been the dubbed voice of Johnny Depp in like 20 other Johnny Depp movies. So he was usually the guy you went to when you were dubbing Johnny Depp into German, but for whatever reason, they'd gone with this Markus Off guy in the Pirates films. And it was a really good fit for whatever reason. The German audiences loved the guy. But because of a contractual disagreement, they went back to this the David Nathan guy. And when the public realized this, there were petitions signed, thousands and thousands of signatures on the petitions to try and get Disney to rehire Off, but it didn't work. Disney stuck with Nathan, and audiences felt a huge element of the iconic Jack Sparrow character was missing from their version of the film. And then just because Disney are extra spiteful about this shit, they continued to use David Nathan for 2017's Dead Men Tell No Tales. Fuck you, Germany. You don't get what you want.
God, even with all that backlash,
I wonder if the movie made less money as a result.
Well, that's what I was wondering. But that's a shame, especially if he did all three other movies.
Yeah, it's a shame for the actor, and it's a shame for the German fans who had gotten attached to that voice for that character. And I'm sure it was a great performance. If people are passionate enough to be like doing petitions and stuff, then clearly they were very fond of him. We already talked about the budget, but we haven't talked about the box office yet, Chris. So even if we go to the larger estimate of 400 million for this movie, this is still a massive hit for Disney. It made just over $1 billion, which is way more than not way more. It's about 100 million more than the previous movie.
This movie made $1 billion. That is fucking insane, isn't it?
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. So it's the second highest grossing Pirates film after Dead Man's Chest.
Wow.
Yeah. So, regardless,
I can't wait to hear the box office numbers on the fifth film, because this film has a reputation now of not being this franchise is considered not viable. So the box office must have been appalling on the next one. Like, I'm excited to hear.
Do you want me to save that for next week?
Yeah, no, save it for next week.
Yeah. So yeah, the generally speaking, the first one made 650 million, which is very good return on investment because it was only made for about 140. The second one, which was made for 225, made what's this? It's 1.06 billion. Then World's End, which is made for $300 million, was 961 million. So, just shy of $1 billion. Still a pretty good return on investment. And then this one made just over $1 billion. 1.04.
Right. Wow.
So it makes it the second highest grossing of the four we've done so far.
That is nice.
So yeah, an absolute hit, regardless of the other stuff around it. But I will say, less of a hit with critics. It will not surprise you to hear, Chris. It had a 33% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and it is the third worst reviewed movie to gross over $1 billion worldwide. The only two movies that made over $1 billion that have been reviewed worse are Transformers: Age of Extinction from 2014, and last year's Jurassic World Dominion, which got 28% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow, fair play.
So, in terms of profits to reviews, this is on the not great end of that spectrum. Made a boatload of money, was not enjoyed by critics, and not myself at the time. But hey, I've come to respect it a lot more now. I think I do think it's better than I remembered, for sure.
Disney also don't give a shit if it's making $1 billion, do they?
Yeah, they're not exactly crying into their pillows at night over at Disney. they're rolling around in Scrooge McDuck money pits.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, with all that said, Chris, it's time for Boats Exist. I don't know what noise to make. So, Blackbeard's ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, is a modified version of the Black Pearl ship from the previous movies. So it's once again portrayed by the ship the Sunset, which had been used in the first three movies again as the Black Pearl. But here it got redesigned as the Queen's Anne Revenge. The biggest change was above the deck. The back was cut off to deck level and rebuilt again into 2 stories to give it more height. And obviously the Queen's Anne Revenge is indeed the ship that the real life Blackbeard did sail around in. It was a vessel he'd captured from the French Navy and then renamed to Queen Anne's Revenge. The movie makes reference to Blackbeard's actual historical death, where he was beheaded, but then his head was hung from the bow of his own ship. I did not know that's how Blackbeard met his end in real life. Brutal.
No, me neither.
You learn something new every day. The Providence, which is the ship that Barbossa uses for the first chunk of the movie when he's working with the British, is portrayed by the It's called the Providence, and it was portrayed by the HMS Surprise, which is a fun name for a ship. Surprise!
Surprise.
The HMS Surprise! This is a part of a collection of ships at the Maritime Museum of San Diego, and it's still visible. You can go look at it to this day. It's still there. To sail the ship during filming, Disney hired a crew and brought in a bunch of volunteers and staff from the Maritime Museum to get it safely, out on water and be filming on it. Because it's a 179-foot fully rigged ship, so that was not an easy job. She was built in Nova Scotia in 1970 from plans for a 1757 British 24-gun frigate, the HMS Rose. It was then purchased by 20th Century Fox in 2001 and was then modified to serve as the HMS Surprise. And before it was under the fictional command of Captain Jack Sparrow, not Jack Sparrow, under Barbossa, it was under the command of Captain Jack Aubrey in a film called Master and Commander, which is a Russell Crowe movie. So there you go.
I've never seen that movie.
What's that, sir?
I've never seen that movie.
I haven't either. Do you think it's good? Do you reckon that's a good movie?
Probably not. I don't know. I don't remember. It's one of those movies. I think I might even own it on DVD. I've just never watched it.
Really?
I might. I think so. Maybe. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, Russell Crowe, Paul Bettany film, 2003. Wait, its full title is Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World. That's the movie's full title.
Yeah.
Jesus. All right. Well, yeah, maybe one day we'll watch it. And we'll be like, that's that ship from Pirates. But yeah, that's all the truth, Chris. Yeah, how are we feeling? That was a journey, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a journey. But you know what? I was always we were always more, well, personally, not so much yourself because of the whole Fountain of the Youth stuff, but I was always more excited for the next one anyway. And tying it back to that original mythology. So I'm going in full of I'm positive vibes for the next one. Dan, how are you feeling?
Terrified.
Well, yeah.
Because not only this movie we lost Verbinski, and the next movie we lose the writers. So I just think like it's that old thing, isn't it? Is it the ship Theseus? That how many parts do you change before it's no longer the thing it was originally? I am slightly worried that we're venturing into some of the worst elements of sequels with the next one.
Yeah, that's fair.
But, I'm willing to have my mind changed because I was going into this movie expecting to hate it because I didn't care for it the first time. I would say I've come out shockingly positive from this one. I enjoy this way more than I thought I would. Still don't think it's a masterpiece. Still don't think it's a great movie at all by any stretch because, like I said, I have a bunch of problems with the way the film was actually made. I still dug a bunch of what's in this movie. A bunch of the ideas, the character stuff, a bunch of the dialogue. So yeah, I'm on board. I'm on board to be won over, is what I guess I'm saying. I'm going in as concerned as I went into this one for Dead Man Tell No Tales or / Salazar's Revenge, depending on your perspective or what country you saw it on. I'm going in with with an open enough mind that if it does surprise me, I'll come back on this podcast and defend where I need to if it is good. But yeah, this got an absolute kicking, if memory serves, at the time. Yeah. This movie got absolutely shat on from a great height. So and I tell you what, let's we can put it down now. Do you want to make any predictions about box office? Because we talked about. You were surprised with how much the last one made. You made $1 billion.
Well, I don't think it did. I don't think it did well because of that reputation the franchise now has. So I am assuming
do you want to put a figure on it or a ballpark? I'm not asking you to do down to the penny, obviously, but do you have a rough guesstimate of where you think it landed?
What was its budget?
Its budget was $230 million.
400-ish.
Yeah?
My guess going in. Yeah.
That's a solid guess. That would sort of follow the trajectory of like the Harry Potter spin-offs. What are they called? Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah,
I think
that's
I
my
think
logic.
the Secrets of Dumbledore, the last one, the one with the really poor reputation, that did about 407 million, and the one before that did 650. Is that right?
Yeah, that would be my guess.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Where if people want to know whether I'm right or wrong, Dan, they can check it out next week, can't they? If they're not already on Patreon.
Yes. So, well, you can check it out right now if they're not already on Patreon. So if you're on Patreon, you're waiting a week. I'm sorry to tell you. You've got 6-7 days. You'll find out that or you could just Google it. You probably have Googled it. You've probably Googled it right now as I'm talking to see. But if you want to hear Chris's reaction to discovering the figure, come on back next week. Or if you're already on, if you're not on Patreon, if you listen to this through iTunes or Spotify or any other podcast app of choice, then guess what you can do right now? You can go to Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You get access to this very podcast 1 week ahead of its double release, as well as our bonus podcast, Nothing But Lyrics, and our other podcast, Analyzing Avatar. And I've got to tell you, there's a Nothing But Lyrics coming up where I have got to admit that I clearly don't remember my original opinion on the song, because I have said across the podcasts the opposite thing.
Okay.
So a little tease for listeners that I clearly don't remember what my position on these lyrics were the first time. I remember there were two stances to have on the song, but I've characterized it the opposite way across that podcast. So I've got to come to the podcast to discover what my actual feelings on the song are.
Is that one we're yet to record or one we've recorded?
One we're yet to record. So it's the Alien Ant Farm song. I think it's called Tia Lupe or Tia Lupa, something like that. And I think basically in an early episode, I said, "Oh, we'll have to get back to that." I remember those lyrics being good or something like that, but but people not thinking they're a bit weird because Alien Ant Farm lyrics are a bit weird. And then on the most recent episode, I characterized it the opposite way around. I was like, "Oh, people really love these lyrics, but I'm not so sure." I guess what has happened, Chris, if I'm guessing, is that I recalled the two positions, but have misremembered which side I landed on because I've not listened to the song in a long time, not read the lyrics in a long time. So we're going to find out. So tune in for that. In fact, if you're listening to this, that'll already be up. That's the next one we're putting up from this recording session. That'll be up well before this goes up. So if you head over to Patreon right now for as little as $1 a month, you can find out how I finally actually felt about Tia Lupe, because I don't know. Clearly I'd misremembered, which is fun. Happens sometimes. I've definitely done that before. Where I've sort of like,
oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the song is so old that I recalled the line drawn in the sand, but I didn't recall which side I stood on. Which is fun. I'm excited to find out, because I've deliberately, since discovering that I said both things the other way around, I've deliberately not gone back to look at the song. So we're going to find out on the podcast.
Nice. That's exciting.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that. And obviously, support us in other ways, plenty of other ways. You can support us just by doing the thing you're doing now, which is listening. We appreciate that. If you want to be a bit more involved in that, but not quite as involved as the Patreon, your other options are, of course, to interact with our content on any of the platforms that we're on, leaving a comment on YouTube, liking it on YouTube, giving it a review on the podcast app you're using, telling a friend, all that good stuff is all out there for you to do if you'd like to sort of share with this. If you've enjoyed our take on the Pirates franchise, and of a person who's who likes those movies or is interested in hearing more about those movies, you can tell them, hey, these guys did podcasts on it. I always find it fun. People come in the Discord and tell us that they've been forcing people to listen to our various podcasts. There was a good one just a couple of days ago, actually. I'll see if I can find it. It was funny. One of our listeners sort of bullied a friend into listening to our podcast on a certain topic. I don't know if I can find it quickly. Let me see. I'll check one thing, and then if it's not there, I'll give up. Let's see. No, I can't find it. That's a shame. But yeah, it was. Oh, here we go. Oh no, I thought I'd found it, but no. So yeah, it's good. It's a good time. So everyone wants to join in. You can get access to our Discord by going through the Patreon as well. Yeah. So I think that's everything for this week. Of course, I mean, we could do the thing where I say to Chris, where are we going next week? But I mean, there's only one place to go next week, Chris. So I don't know if we.
Yeah. Well, depending on your territory, Dan, either Dead Man Tell No Tales or Salt Sal's Revenge.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we going next week?
I like the idea that he's called, instead of Salazar, he's called Salt Tsar. He's like some sort of salt-based monster.
Salazar.
No, I'm on board. I want Salt Tsar's Revenge. He's some sort of like salt-based monster.
I'm excited in equal measure, I would say, to both watch this movie and no longer be watching Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Right. Yeah, I'm now regretting the choice to do these, I think. No, I don't think I'm not quite there yet, actually. These last two. We were always going to do the main trilogy, but I am sort of on the cusp now of, like, I'm very nervous about watching this last one.
I don't think it's, it's not Harry Potter levels of, being done with these movies. But I think it's probably... I didn't feel that way, about the Santa Claus or anything like that. It's probably the most fatigued I've got with a franchise that isn't the Harry Potter movies.
But I think, is that not the figures? Because in terms of the number of movies, the most we've ever done for another series is 4.
Yeah.
We've never gone
well
to 5 and above for franchises beyond Harry Potter and this. So
no, but if Dial of Destiny was out when we did Indiana Jones, I'd have been more pumped to watch that than this. It's also slightly I think these are weaker movies as a whole than Indiana Jones, for example.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, 100%. I would agree with that. I think these movies owe an awful lot to Indiana Jones too, which is fun.
Yes,
as a comparison.
Well, that too. Yeah.
So
there you go.
Come back next week and see if I can find a way to shoehorn in how much I don't like Rob Marshall.
That's fair.
I'll figure it out. I'll find a way.
Oh yeah, it'll be there. Yeah. Even you'll be like right, Chris. Go to 2 minutes in the movie, and you see these 10 seconds. Let me tell you now, Chris. Better than anything Rob Marshall's ever directed, isn't it?
I must admit, I'm hoping. I don't even. Do you know who directed the next one? I don't. I actually have no idea. Wait, let me quickly find it. But I've got to. There will have to, naturally, because of the way this conversation has gone, to be fair, there will have to be a comparison to how this one was handled. Because depending on who they get directing it, maybe it will have more of that, like, inventiveness, that spark, that will allow, for the movie to feel a bit more creative. It's a directing team.
I was going to say it's a team.
Yeah, Espen Sandberg and oh god, I'm so sorry. I have no idea how to pronounce his name. Joachim Ronning. I will Google how to pronounce that before we do the next podcast. Because, yeah.
So they've not directed much.
Either of them?
Well, they seem to be a partnership. There seems to be a film here called Kon-Tiki. Which was a film mainly shot on the island of Malta, and that seems to have been nominated for quite a few awards. An Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. And Palm Springs International Film Festival Directors to Watch, Golden Globes and Satellite as well for Best Foreign Language Film.
It looks like these directors separated after Salazar's Revenge and have both done different individual stuff since, because it looks like the guy whose name I will learn how to pronounce next time. He worked on and directed Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, whereas the other guy didn't. Right, okay. So I'm guessing around that same time he made a movie called... the same year, he made a movie called Amundsen. So it seems like as a directing team, they worked on a lot of the same exact projects, and it seems following Salazar's Revenge, they've both gone off to do some separate stuff. I'm not saying because of, I'm just saying that's what physically has happened. So interesting. We'll see. Look,
come back next week to hear that.
Yeah, to hear me to be either disdainful because they've done the same thing, or use it as an excuse to shit from a great height on Rob Marshall.
I think I know where I'm betting my money.
Yeah, place your bets, everyone. We know where the odds are. I'll tell you that.
In that case,
if we named these podcasts, would this one just be called Dan Shits on Rob Marshall from a Great Height?
No, I think
2.5 hours.
Dan loses his erections. Open brackets.
I took a sip of my drink at the wrong time then.
No, he does a job. We've talked about him enough, right? I'm calling it. My name's Chris Billingham.
My name's Dan Dillon.
And this review has been rewound.